Here we go.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tara Morrison. I'm the superintendent of Rock Creek Park, and I've been there just over 9 months now, so there's still a lot that I don't know. But thanks to people like Beth and Nick and actually others of you who I've heard about but have not yet met, I've had a great deal of help over the last 9 months learning about everything that's going on in the park. It's a wonderful place to be, and it's absolutely a great resource for the District of Columbia to have this park in our backyards. But as Beth said, it's important that we all work together to make sure that it is there for future generations. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here. And again, Nick Bartolomeo, our Chief Ranger, is here with me, and we're excited to begin networking and engaging in conversation with you all. Before I get into the more natural and environmental updates on what's going on in the park, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the park. And as Beth mentioned, Rock Creek proper is just a little over 1,700 acres, but what we find is that a lot of people aren't aware of all of the other parks that are administered by Rock Creek Park. So we're also responsible for places like Meridian Hill, Georgetown Waterfront Park, the Carter Barron Amphitheater, some of the Civil War Defenses of Washington sites, such as Fort Reno and Fort Stevens, Dumbarton Oaks Park, and glad to see Lou Slade here, Montrose Park. There are others, but I think that's enough to show the diversity of the sites that we're responsible for managing. And just in the time that I've been here, we actually had an exciting spring and summer with the completion of several projects that had been going on for the last several years. Beth mentioned the reopening of Pierce Mill. We also completed and opened the final phase of Georgetown Waterfront Park. Battleground Cemetery reopened and was dedicated this Memorial Day after an extensive rehabilitation project, and we also rededicated the Khalil Gibran Memorial after work in that area with the gardens and the landscaping. So it's been an exciting time, and we're re-energizing and excited about working with our many volunteers and communities, and also engaging with new parties. We have several friends groups that we work closely with: Rock Creek Conservancy, Dumbarton Oaks Park Conservancy, the Friends of Georgetown Waterfront Park, Friends of Pierce Mill, the newly formed Friends of Montrose Park, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. But we have a great series of partners who are really dedicated to the resources within Rock Creek Park. So now to focus on the topic of today, and thanks to Nick for helping me to prepare some comments, because as we all know, there's a lot going on, and we wanted to make sure we stayed focused and hit the highlights. And we have actually some overlap, so that's good that we're all on the same page, right? The first area that I'll talk about is non-native invasive plants. And as we know, this is one of our most enduring challenges in the park. And these plants come from, and this is an area that I wasn't quite as familiar with, but have learned a lot in the work that's going on. But they come as far away as Asia and Europe, or different areas of the country. And many, people that we encounter in trying to educate the public on invasives and the damage that they cause don't necessarily understand that things such as English ivy, they're so common and familiar to us that we don't necessarily think of them as invasives. But without control, these things are and do become pests and seriously threaten this area's environmental health. People also transport these plants unknowingly and unaware of what is occurring, especially when the seeds cling to things like people's clothes, pets, or cars, and are moved from one area to another. And sometimes we're not familiar with the species when we're purchasing them from garden suppliers and plant them in their gardens, and as such, then they come into the park. We also find that illegal dumping of yard waste is another way in which the plants and their seeds find their way to the natural areas of the park. And usually it's just a matter of time before they plant, escape, and spread. Exotic and invasive plant species can change the park's natural ecosystems and disrupt the delicate balance between native plants, animals, and other organisms. They compete for water, nutrients, and sunlight, often completely displacing native plants. They also replace food sources for wildlife with plants that are inedible or toxic plants. And they draw pollinators away from native plants, push rare species close to extinction, and reduce natural biodiversity. Once established, they require enormous quantities of time, work, and money to control. And we spend many hours talking about non-native invasives in the park and how to work with our volunteers and others to try to control them. To address the threats posed by invasive non-native plants, the park is applying the principles of integrated pest management, which is a science-based decision-making process that guides park managers when investigating a pest situation. The IPM approach determines the most appropriate and cost-effective management solution for the specific pest situation. One of these approaches is to work with volunteers and partner groups, including the Rock Creek Conservancy and Dunbar and Oaks Park Conservancy, to assist the park by performing manual and mechanical removal of exotic and invasive plants. 45 volunteers who are currently trained through the park's Weed Warrior program and 25 other volunteer groups performed invasive plant removal in Rock Creek Park during our last fiscal year, which ended this past September. Combined, these volunteers contributed a total of approximately 1,998 hours of labor removing invasive non-native plants. But we don't rely solely on volunteers. The National Park Service's National Capital Region Exotic Plant Management Team works with the park in reducing existing infestations and restoring native plant communities. The park also uses a contractor to treat 144 acres of invasive impact land last year. And Nick, remind me, is this in the Glover? Where is this that the contractor works?
The contractor works in a lot of different areas, but there's 4 targeted areas. I bet you actually mentioned one earlier of the field of lesser celandine, which is now fig buttercup, just in the northern sections of the park.
In the 4 contract areas where treatment was continued from previous years, nearly 90% of the invasive species have been brought under control. A 31.4-acre floodplain forest infested with fig buttercup was treated for the 3rd time in 2011. In addition, for the first time in more than 7 years, the park now has a dedicated vegetation management specialist position. Ranger Anna Chuquin worked for the National Park Service's, the National Capital Region's exotic management team before coming to the park last year. Her 3 years of seasonal experience as a biological technician, coupled with the knowledge gained in her first undergraduate degree in natural resource management, helped prepare her for the task of managing invasive non-native plants. Ranger Chuquin oversees the activities of the park's invasive plant management contractor, as well as the work performed in Rock Creek Park by her former colleagues with the exotic plant management team. She also works closely with another new park employee, Ranger Scott Einberger, to manage the volunteers who assist the park with non-native plants removal. And again, I just want to point out, in addition to Beth, Lou Slade, who works with the Dunbar and Oaks Park Conservancy, who's been really dedicated to working with us to get weed warriors trained and out in that part of the park to work on non-native invasives. The next area that we'd like to talk about is water resources. Water quality improvements were the focus of several major recent projects in the park. DC Water recently completed work on several projects that closed 4 combined sewer overflows. These overflows were part of the old stormwater and sewer infrastructure that underlies the oldest sections of the city. During periods of high precipitation, these systems would pour raw sewage into Rock Creek Park and eventually the Potomac River and Chesapeake Bay. DC Water contractors removed the connections between these 2 systems at 4 locations: Connecticut Avenue and Cathedral Avenue, North Waterside Drive, Northwest, above Q Street and South Waterside Drive, and adjacent to Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. This will allow stormwater to flow into the creek without carrying sewage, which is now routed to the Blue Plains Treatment Plant in Southwest Washington, D.C. An evolving partnership with another District of Columbia agency, the Department of the Environment, has more fully developed recently. Rock Creek Park currently is working with DDOE to prepare an environmental assessment for a proposed project to restore a tributary of Broad Branch. The tributary is located just upstream of 36th Street to just upstream of the crossing on Broad Branch Road. It drains into the approximately 170-acre Broad Branch watershed and currently is piped beneath property owned by Rock Creek Park in the city. This project aims to remove a portion of the stream that was piped underground in 1937 and restore it to its historic channel, a process known as daylighting. The goal is to help process and remove pollutants from the stream by exposing it to sunlight, air, soil, and vegetation. The project will also reduce nutrient and sediment pollution from erosion caused by fast-flowing stormwater and non-point source pollution by increasing groundwater infiltration and creating meanders and floodplain wetlands. This project is critical because fast stormwater flows and non-point source pollution have eroded the banks of the creek and caused sedimentation to occur. This has destabilized the surrounding environment, reduced infiltration of water into underlying aquifers, and compromised wildlife habitat. Without intervention, stormwater will continue to degrade and pollute these resources. The environmental assessment for the project is undergoing final review by DDOE in the park and may be released for public comment within the next several months. Our partnership with DDOE has also allowed for a spectacular stream rehabilitation project to move from concept to reality. In a natural environment, a significant portion of precipitation infiltrates the soil, enters groundwater aquifers, and eventually emerges into above-ground waterways. However, in the urbanized environments surrounding Rock Creek Park, impervious surfaces hamper infiltration and decrease this flow of water. During precipitation events, water runoff from impervious surfaces discharges into waterways, often causing erratic and violent storm surges. When waterways are not equipped to handle the energy of these surges, soil erosion occurs, which harms surrounding vegetation and causes sediment deposition downstream, negatively impacting aquatic species. Until this past summer, this was the situation at Milkhouse Ford Run and Bigham Run, located on parkland just to the east of Oregon Avenue. Through grant funds provided by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, DDOE proposed to install regenerative stormwater conveyances in these stream beds. RSCs utilize a series of shallow aquatic pools, grade controls, native vegetation, and an underlying sand channel to absorb and control the conveyance of stormwater. These systems are designed to convey flows associated with extreme floods, such as a 100-year flood event, in a manner that minimizes erosions. The benefits are many. They include providing a base flow channel, trapping sediment and nutrients, recharging groundwater beneath and adjacent to stream beds, and creating wildlife habitat. Park staff first completed the environmental compliance needed to allow the project to proceed. The installation process was largely completed by October of 2011 and tested by the heavy rains we received this early fall and early winter. If you haven't seen this area, it's Beth demonstrated through her pictures. I encourage you all to go down there. And I had a chance to stop by when the work was being done and have a walkthrough with one of our natural resource specialists, Bill Yeaman, and it really is an exciting project.
It's right by the community garden off of Oregon Avenue. So if you go there and just walk either north or south, you'll see, there's two, you'll see it either way.
Projects like this are a large component of the Phase 2 Watershed Implementation Plan for Rock Creek, working to address a mandate from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to reduce nutrient and sediment flow into the Chesapeake Bay. The park recently evaluated the merits and feasibility of hundreds of possible stream restoration, trash, and stormwater management projects proposed by the District of Columbia Department of the Environment for Rock Creek land. These projects included rain gardens, bioswales, reforestation, and regenerative stormwater conveyances to slow stormwater flows into Rock Creek and remove nutrients before they enter the creek. This is no small effort and will be carried out over many years. But the park now has a model to follow with the regenerative stormwater conveyances that were installed last year. And I have to say, when we went through the list of hundreds of projects, that was a great opportunity for me to learn where all of our parkland exists in the district. And it was, we really did go through an extensive process to evaluate each of the projects that were proposed. We do certainly look forward to working with the city to meet our obligations to protect water quality in Rock Creek and the Chesapeake Bay. The next area focuses on recreation, and you all may be familiar with the multi-use trail project EA that's currently open for public comment now. So in addition to working with DDOE, we have worked with the District Department of Transportation for the last several years and the Federal Highway Administration on plans to reconstruct the park's main multi-use path. The final project proposes to reconstruct a 3.7-mile segment of the paved trail that runs through Rock Creek Park and the National Zoo. The project also includes a 3,000-foot segment of the existing Rose Park Trail and proposes paving specific social trails, including a heavily used trail just north of Pierce Mill, and improving numerous trail grade crossings. It also includes plans to install a bridge just south of the zoo tunnel, as well as conceptual plans for widening the zoo tunnel sidewalk itself. The environmental assessment for this project was the subject of a recent public meeting in Columbia Heights. and has been released for public comment and is available on the National Park Service's Planning, Environment, and Public Comment website. And we actually have a sheet here with our contact information as well as links to some of the projects that we're talking about. And I think the last area that I will talk about is deer management. And this is also something that many of you may be familiar with. The park does have a large deer population, and because they eat a wide variety of items, including tree and shrub seedlings, and this again is something that Beth talked about, the large population is having a detrimental effect on the park's resources. In a self-sustaining forest ecosystem, there would be a wide range of native trees in all stages of life, from seedling to sapling to mature. There would also be an understory layer of non-woody plants, including a variety of wildflowers and native shrubs. At Rock Creek Park, with data gathered since 1991, shows conclusively that this vital mix is missing. The population of deer is now so great that it has compromised the ability of native forests to regenerate. In addition, over the past 20 years, the increased deer population has caused detrimental changes in species composition, structure, abundance, and distribution of native plant communities and associated wildlife. Deer are now so dominant in the environment that they have decreased the habitat for other species. In 2006, the Park Service and Rock Creek Park began the process of drafting a science-based plan to restore the forest health. The plan focuses on managing the deer population so that the forest can regenerate. After extensive public input, the park completed the final white deer management plan, which is in draft form. We expect that the final plan, which takes the form of an environmental impact statement, will be released in the next several weeks. The deer management preferred alternative identified in the 2009 draft management plan involves a combination of lethal and non-lethal methods that would lower the park's deer population and then stabilize it between 15 and 20 deer per square mile. This population number will allow the park's vegetation to recover over time. The number was determined by a team of scientists and specialists from a variety of state and federal agencies based in part on a review of recent studies conducted in forests similar to those of Rock Creek Park. The science team was formed to provide technical information and input during the planning process. This population level could be achieved in 2 to 3 years. It may take 6 or more years for vegetation growth to recur to the point where forest regeneration is sustainable. We certainly plan on keeping the public informed of developments with the deer management in Rock Creek Park, and that information, our website information, is also included on the sheet that we'll hand out. So that's just a sampling of what's going on in the natural resources world at Rock Creek Park. Nothing to be said of the cultural and parkway and other activities that we're involved in. So again, I'm happy to make this introduction with you all and to share just a bit of what we've got going on. And Nick and I are certainly more than happy and willing to continue conversations. Thank you.